I do hope you behaved. I didn't see any pictures, so the assumption is everyone on that was on their best behavior. I see there's only 23 of us. I think I only know of one person who got, or at least was eligible for accreditation. So I don't know where the rest of the class is. But I am going to just move swiftly through procurement, and then we will do DILICT, and then we move on to the JBCC. Are there any questions with regards to work that we've already covered to this point?
Evening, Doc. How are you doing?
I'm good. I am not Doc. I am Ms. So yes, not Doc. Yes, yes. Doc is the other Zanele.
Aski, say I get confused. Who's a doc? Who is a professor? Who is a ma'am? Who is a science? But it's okay. I will take note of that. No, I just have a complaint from my side to you. I've sent you 2 emails. My other 3 colleagues also drafted you emails, and we are not reverting to any of us.
Okay, what are the emails about? Because my inbox is clear, so I don't know how I have missed yours.
It's not just me. My other colleagues, they are about exemption, module accreditation and exemption.
Okay, I only received about 3 that I've responded to. And I think I got the impression that those people were ladies. So I have not seen yours. I will check again. I'm not sure, unless you send it to Dr. Matsani and you thought you sent it to me.
I don't know, but what I did, I went through the study guide, I took the lectures email, and then I emailed.
That should be the correct email. I will just check again. Okay.
Okay, no problem. Thanks a lot.
All right, thank you. Okay, I don't see any more, well, I don't see hands. I don't know if there's anyone who wants to say anything. So we've covered introduction to the law of contracts, which is something quite a lot of people know. If you've done contracts law or commercial law either in your second year or contracts law in your third year, it's generally an introduction. So some people may just find it repetitive, but part of the reason we do it now is, I don't know if that's still the case. When the program started, we had quite a lot of people who had been working. So you find that they finished their BTech a long time ago, and then they'd been working, and then they decided to come back to school. So it was just to try and put everyone on the same footing in terms of schoolwork, just a reminder, or for everyone. So if you did this last year or 2 years ago, it's still very fresh in your mind. Apologies for repetition, but we'll soon move on to the JBCC. And I think in 2 weeks, you guys will be ready for the online test. So yeah. So procurement, in dictionary terms, the action of obtaining something. When we look at the CIDB best practice guideline, it describes procurement as a process that creates, manages, and fulfills contracts. So when you start at stage 1, and that's already procurement, stage 1 of a project initiation, because you're going to create, manage, and fulfill a contract. Okay, so it starts at that very beginning. So that entire process, I know when we talk procurement in general terms, we speak of it as if it's just tender procurement when we procure a contractor. But it starts way before that. It's just at the stage 4, procurement and tendering, or what is it, detailed design, depending on which stages you are using, IDMS or the PROXA stages. And then why tender? So sometimes you even tender for designs, not necessarily for the contractor. It's for just the contractor. So if you think about the RMB head office just off, I think it's 11th Avenue, No, it's Bears Nodia, actually. It's not 11th Avenue, it's Bears Nodia. So that very beautiful futuristic building that houses RMB, F&B, and West Bank. What I understand is they had like a competition for the design, and then they had a number of people designing. So in some instances, you can have a tender for the design of something, not necessarily at contractor level. The whole idea behind a tender is you provide competition and thus reduce costs. So for instance, if I want something done and I come to you directly to say, can you do 1, 2, 3 for me? You tell me your rate card. So okay, fine. If I'm going to do that, I do it at this amount. And I either engage your services or I walk away. But if I say, I go out onto market and say, I want a wedding dress done. This is the spec. I want it to be elegant and futuristic and classy and all these things. Who is interested? And please bring your proposals. Because there's competition, you are bound to either reduce your markup or something like you have to give me something extra so that you win amongst all the other people. So that is the whole idea. However, what we need to be mindful of is that at tender stage, the employer or the person advertising the tender is not committing to proceeding with the project. We could advertise for tender and then we get responses and realize, this is not going to work. We do not have enough money. Or all of them are saying they're going to take too long, therefore. Okay, so they are under no obligation to proceed with the project just because they advertised the tender and we responded to it. They're under no obligation to accept the highest or the lowest bid. They can have their own criteria and decide who they are willing to accept. They're under no obligation, or they do not commit to accept any tender for that matter. You could all respond to a tender that's advertised and then they appoint somebody else who didn't even respond. Okay. And generally, they do not commit to giving reasons for acceptance or for refusal, unless in their tender document, they say that they will do all of these, okay? So in terms of construction procurement, we look at the CIDB notes or the CIDB guidelines. So when you are dealing with procurement, you need to create an enabling environment for reconstruction, for growth and development in the construction industry. This is why the Construction Industry Development Board was established. Okay, so if you remember, all these things came post 1994, so we're still trying to reconstruct a South Africa that is inclusive, that is free and fair for everyone. So it's that create an enabling environment for reconstruction, for growth, and for development in the construction industry. So we need to have policy and strategy that promotes stability, it fosters economic and international competitiveness, but also creates sustainable development. So these are the things that will go into the conditions of a tender, okay? There's also the aim to address historical imbalances as you are generating new industry capacity. We all know what the historical imbalances are that we need to deal with. So if you look at triple BEE, affirmative action, those policies, that was the strategy. The aim is also to make the contracts simple to understand, okay? So plain, simple English, it can't be a very niche. Please mute yourself because I don't know who it is. You also want to streamline payment procedures and create security and surety arrangements. Continued review of contract documents to ensure that they do not create barriers to increased participation. So you have to make sure that your choice of contract is inclusive. It doesn't create a barrier for other entrants into the market. Okay. So the CIDB endorses about 4 types of contracts. So the whole idea was to reduce the number of forms of contracts that are used in South Africa so that we have standardization and we have documentation that can cater for a wider variety of client requirements. So the 4 would be JBCC, NEC, FIDIC, and GCC. Those are the contracts that the CIDB has endorsed. And then we do have bespoke contracts as well. Okay, so those are the contracts. We will discuss them, not in the order that I've listed them here. We're going to start with the JBCC. We'll move on to the NEC, and then we will do the FIDIC. I do not do the GCC, so I do not cover it in this syllabus. The problem or some of the disadvantages associated with standard forms of contract is that they may be cumbersome because they are generic. They're aimed at a wide variety of clients. They have this one size fits all approach. You may find that you need something a lot more simpler, and they come across as cumbersome for you. They are a compromise because then you have all these bodies that sit on the boards or the committees that come up with the contract. So you have different representatives. So these contracts are a compromise and they take long to update. So you could raise an issue with something within a contract and then you want it updated, but then the committee sits and they're like, but that works for you, but not for everyone else. And part of the reason, so they do take a bit of time. We'll see when we look at the NEC and the JBCC and the FIDIC, like how long. I think the FIDIC, when I was still doing mining, we were working with FIDIC 2009. And then we have a 2017 version, which is currently the latest. I haven't seen any new ones, so they haven't released anything. So you see when we say they take long to update, they have to be agreed between different bodies within an industry. Okay, so with the JBCC, you have quantity surveyors represented on the JBCC board. We have architects, we have contractors, we have public sector, government, represented by the CIDB, so that everyone's needs are sort of catered for, and this is why these contracts are a compromise. So they have to be familiar for everyone who is in the industry, and the idea is to spread the risk more equitably, and not burden one party with more risk than the other. The benefit is that you avoid the cost and time of task-specific contracts, because if you have to come up with a contract every time, that would take a lot of time and cost. If you have to engage a lawyer, if you ever tried to, those guys, you send them a letter to say, I received this, and they charge per hour, and they'll tell you, this is my rate per hour. If I'm going to read this, that's how I'm going to charge you, They take your calls, they charge you. They make a call to you, charge. So, yeah. So generally, procurement is a process of buying something. In our industry and for the professionals, we are selling a service, right? We don't sell a product. The contractor will build a house. The architect is selling a service, a design service. The project manager is selling a service. The structural engineer, the electrical, we're all selling services. So that process of buying, that process of procuring services. So construction procurement just simply refers to the process of how construction contracts are created, managed, and fulfilled. Okay, so all the activities that are undertaken by a client or an employer who's seeking to bring about construction or refurbishment of a building, that is considered as construction procurement. So procurement departments or organizations that deal with procurement are often in charge of planning, design, construction, operation, maintenance, and disposal of construction project. I don't know if last year in economics you touched life cycle costing or life cycle planning, but at initiation, when you look at a building, let's say you're building a clinic, you work out how long its lifespan is and what's supposed to happen at the end of its lifespan. So when you look at the operations plan and the maintenance plan, you look at, okay, after how many years do I need to replace this? After how many months do I need to do that? How often do we repaint? How that's working out how much this building is going to cost you throughout its life. And then you discount it to present value. So that is what life cycle costing is about. So when you look at procurement, there are 6 principal activities in construction procurement. You establish what it is that you want procured. So are we building a hotel? Are we building a road, a bridge? What is it? And then decide on the procurement strategy in terms of contracting, pricing, and targeting strategy, and the procurement procedure, okay? Once these have been decided, then you solicit tender offers. So you go out and tender advert. Tenderers respond, you evaluate the tenders, appoint, and then afterwards you administer contract, and then you confirm compliance and requirements. So when we look at these 3 contracts that we're going to look at for the rest of this year, we will be looking at them under this lens. Okay, what are we procuring? What is the procurement strategy, or what does this particular project, what strategy does it respond to, what a particular contract? Okay, and all of that. You can read with the ISO 10845, 2010 and 2011, processes and methods, formatting and compilation. So what the CIDB does is it provides these guidelines of how you put down a tender document. I don't know if you've ever seen a government tender. There's yellow pages, there's pink pages. All those are from what the CIDB recommends. And then so part 1, you'd be looking at the processes and methods and procedures that are going to be followed. Part 2, the formatting and compilation of the procurement document. So what font are you going to use? What is the spacing? What is the sizing? What goes where? And then what are the standard conditions of tender? And if you're calling for expressions of interest, what are the standard conditions? Those are the conditions you follow. Maybe you want to look at targeted enterprises that should participate. How do you handle that? Participation of joint ventures or targeted partners in contracts, local enterprises and local labor in contracts, participation of targeted labor in contracts, okay? Under your procurement policy, you would have to look at what is or who is the source of funding. There's a saying that goes, whoever pays the piper calls the tune. So whoever is financing the project gets to set the terms. So if it's owner financed, owner will decide what processes, what strategies need to be followed. Public sector financed, then public strategies, public processes will be followed. Developer financed, if it's privately funded, or if it's a triple P and you have, so it's public-private partnerships, that will also determine what the terms are. Now, you can do your tendering by selection method, where you negotiate or you work out a partnering or a framework, so selective competition or open competition. So you can go out to tender, advertise, and be open to everyone who has a construction company at a certain CIDB level, and then they all respond. Or it could be so that's open competition. It could be a selective competition where you pre-screen the people you will invite to tender. So you would check their background, all of that, pre-qualify them first. Then once they're pre-qualified, you say they can be invited for this tender. Sometimes in the private sector, it's contractors. You invite only the contractors you've worked with or that whose history you have and you know you can trust them. So that's the selective competition. And then let's say you invite about 6 of them and then you brief them, they all respond, and then you check generally if it's selective and the tenderers are pre-qualified, that's when they will go for the lowest tender. Okay, because performance and all of that, in terms of ability, capability, it's proven. We're just more interested in how much can we save for this. With government, it's slightly different. The terms are set by Treasury and you have to follow the CIDB rules. And they will tell you it's either a 90-10, where 90 score is for price and then 10 is for the technical part, or 80-20 depending on the size of the project. And when we say the size, we talk about the amount of money. So again, how are we pricing? Are we pricing work and materials? So with some clients, you find that they say that we'll give you material when I just bring the labor, or you're bringing the material and the labor as in a bill of quantities, or you're going to build and manage the facility. So who takes responsibility for design? Is it client design or is it contractor design? That's where you have like your 10K or engineer procure, like your EPCM, engineer procure, construct, and then manage. Or sometimes it's just an EPC, they construct, they give you the key and they walk away, okay? Maybe you are a company that has in-house design teams. Who's responsible for managing the project? Is it the client? Is it the lead designer? Is it the principal contractor, management contractor, joint venture, supply chain integration, single source, integrated, fragmented, competitive, collaborative? All those are decisions that would have to be made. So generally, with the initiation of a project, you need to justify business need for that project. So feasibility study, viability study, that thing, okay? So in government, they will do a business case, and these are social projects where you build a case for building a clinic in a particular area or a school. The aim there is not profit, but more service delivery. And then roles and responsibilities. Objectives, outcomes, scope, stakeholder identification. You know, if you're going to build a clinic in an area, who are the people you need to speak with first? Okay, who are the stakeholders? Who do you need to inform? Who do you need so that you don't have problems? What procurement strategy are you going to follow? Client brief, procurement routes, work packages, market engagement. At what point do you go out to the market? How do you engage the market? Through the newspapers? Do you call a few people? Okay. Liability. When you look at procurement tactics as well, so the contracts, what sort of contracts? Who bears the risk for what? Pre-qualification, how does awarding work? Performance, what is the level of performance we're looking for? What happens if we don't reach that? How do we measure progress, evaluation of progress, and then exit strategies? Discharging contractual obligations, which is performance. Sorry, and then once you've performed, you can leave the contract. Settling disputes. How do you deal with disputes? What is your default method? Is it adjudication? Is it litigation? Is it, okay, how do you sign off work, move on? All those processes have to be predetermined. We can't try find them out once we're in the project. Once the project is up and running, it's too late. Okay. So the recommended forms of contract I've already mentioned. Okay, I don't know why it goes back, but let's go to okay, I've covered that. I've spoken about your target strategy for BEE and all those other things. Let me just see it, because that There's a bit of a repetition, so I just want to see. Okay, I think I went back a bit. Yes, Mpho, your hand is up.
Good evening, ma'am. I hope that you're doing well. I'm not sure, but I think your recording has stopped. It looks like it has stopped.
Not on my side. It's still recording.
Oh, okay, because I just
Yes.
received. Okay, thank you.
Okay, maybe I don't know. Maybe it's your team's. Are you joining from a UJ account or from your personal account?
From my personal account.
Oh, okay. So it does limit if you're joining from a personal account. So I think that's why. But I'm doing it from because I know after about 30 minutes, if I join from my own personal account, then it tells me that I've reached my limit. Then I have to log out and log in again. So I think that's what's happening. On my side, it's still recording. So
Okay.
we're still safe.
Thank you for that, ma'am.
All right. So I've spoken about the targeting strategies, triple BEE, evaluation points, and sometimes there's incentives for KPIs. Sometimes when government goes out to tender, they also ask those companies that are responding to the tender to say, okay, fine, how are you going to make sure that this project leaves a lasting impression to the community? How are you going to uplift the community other than just building the clinic? Any skills development, mandatory subcontracting. So all those. Okay, so these are like your secondary procurement objectives. Then the pricing strategy. Are you going to use lump sum based? And lump sum is where we have activities. So if you see on your project program, those lines where you have your activities, this activities. So let's say, what is it? Site establishment starts on this day, ends whatever, that's an activity. So we put a price to that to say site establishment will be this much. And then maybe excavations as an activity, and then laying pipes as an activity will start and end. That's your lump sum. So when an activity is done, we pay you the lump sum amount. You decide how you split the activities. Then you have a bill of quantities, which breaks the elements into smaller items, or you can have a price list or a pricing schedule, and you can break it down whichever way, some sort of a cost plan, and we pay based on that. Activity schedule, which sort of would work on a lump sum basis. So that's priced based. Then there's cost based. So the contractor, so price based is the price that the contractor charges. They give you the price beforehand to say excavations, I charge 300 per cubic meter of excavation, normal. If it's in hard rock, it's 750. If it's in soft rock, it's 550 type of thing. So that's price based. Cost based, he does the work, and then based on how much it cost him, then you pay him. So you reimburse him for his cost plus his markup. So that's cost based. And then there's target cost, happens with the NEC target contract, where the aim is to target a particular price by a particular date, a particular cost by a particular date. And then if the work goes beyond that, then the cost is shared between the contractor and the client. Okay. And then there's the management based. TD, I can't see your full name. You can ask.
Good evening, ma'am. I would like to just ask, in regards to a contract, since we have so many JBCC, GCC, and all of them, the project that you're doing, what would determine what contract you use?
Okay, so quite a number of things. For one, what type of project are you doing? You will find out when we look at the JBCC that it's more suited for building projects, and more suited for building projects where the client is responsible for design. However, if you're doing a road, let's say you're revamping the N1 from Gauteng to Polokwane, JBCC may not be the best because that's an engineering project. So you could find that the GCC would be better suited. So you look at the type of work that you're going to do, responsibilities, who's doing the design, okay, who wants to assume risk for changes. So there's quite a number of things that you look at. Sometimes you find that a client just says, look, I want the N1 revamped. I don't want to get involved with the how and all of that. So that's when you would go 10-key, where you just say, okay, give it to the contractor. They will design, come up with the layer works. You just tell them how or what level of performance you are looking for. So an example would be when the Department of Statistics was looking for a head office. They had leased a building in the CBD of Pretoria, and the lease was coming to an end, and government had decided, look, we can't keep on renting. We need to have our own buildings. So they decided to build. And what they did was, okay, it was a triple P, but what the end user did was they told this team that, listen, we want officers. This is our structure. Statistician general supported by these people, blah, 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 blah. You come up with a proposal, you show us. And then in that sort of, okay, you see, it's afternoon and my English has left me. I'm trying to remember what it is, but where we said the performance level, or, in that agreement, they state that, okay, at this level, so for instance, at executive level, everyone needs a cellular office. But from this level downwards, they can sit in the open plan, and then you create POS areas for them and stuff like that. So it depends on what your client is looking for. Also, the appetite for risk. Do they want to take some of the risk, or do they want to transfer all the risk to the project team? I'm not sure if I've answered you, but as the course progresses, you will see that there is, or at least you'll understand what I mean. But yeah, the type of work is the first thing you look at, but also who's doing the design, and then who assumes the risk for changes. I hope that answers you. Okay, then pricing strategy, we have management based. So I have yet to see a management contract done properly. It is complicated and convoluted. Like it's a lot. I've yet to find an example in South Africa where it was done like properly. You have a lot of contractors reporting to the management contractor, and then the management contractor reporting to the client. So it's I'm just trying to think. It happens in mega projects. There's one project I think that I've ever seen we did on this one. It was that new multi-product pipeline from the Durban Harbour to Heidelberg, where they wanted to pump fuel from Durban straight to Heidelberg instead of transporting it in trucks. And yeah, a lot of money was lost there because of that type of contract. Sipho, your hand is up.
Oh, no, I just wanted to add to say, management contracts happens on bigger projects. I think we were once involved in construction of UMP, University of Mpumalanga. That was the type of contract that was happening.
You are very right. Do you did it work best? What was your experience of it then, if I may ask?
My experience on it worked best, but the turnaround time it's delaying because someone another contractor is responsible to manage other contractors while it doesn't have the final say. Just a
it
delay,
is very cumbersome. It is, and
Yeah.
because it wastes time, it becomes expensive. Eh?
Yes,
Okay.
that's
All right. No.
that's what the challenges or the shortfalls around it.
Okay. All right. No. Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay. So here we're looking at Treasury regulations. So these are applicable to the public sector. So public sector is government projects. So even if it's a Transnet project, Transnet is a state entity, Eskom is a state entity, Joburg Water, City Power, those, okay? So the treasury regulations, because you are dealing with public money, the minute you are using public money, treasury regulations apply. The idea is to safeguard public money. And then the laws that are applicable is administrative justice and access to information. So your PAIA and PAJA Act. So I'm trying to remember what the P is. Because then the A would be PAJA Administration of Justice Act. And these are the laws that they could use when they want to understand why a certain tender went a particular way. PAIA is that one where they want access to information. So for instance, a tender has been awarded, but they're very cagey about how they did it. And you can quote the PAIA to say, this is public money you're using. We want to know how that contractor was appointed over this one, or that type of thing. You can also use that same act with interviews. When you go for an interview and then they never get back to you. So again, when dealing with the public sector, don't try and bring this up with the private sector. You'll have serious problems. Then there's rules that govern electronic communication. Okay, so electronic communication could be your emails, social media like WhatsApp, SMSs as well. Then there's prevention of corrupt practices. Don't know how effective that is, but those are your treasury regulations, and this was an attempt from Treasury, from Parliament, to safeguard public money. Okay, then you have South African National Standards 294, which describes the supply management chain process, or the supply chain management process. And when you do tenders or you're working on procurement for public sector, you follow the standard of uniformity that is set by the CIDB. Then we also have the triple PFA, which is the Preferential Procurement Policy Framework Act. So it's Act 5 of 2000. This is that act that says with tenders, I think above 50 million, you have to give 30% of that to local labor or something like that, local, that SMMEs in the area. It's the piece of legislation that a lot of blame for your business firms, those guys who hijack projects. So at the heart of the triple PFA is you have to award tenders in accordance with a system that is fair, a system that is equitable, transparent, competitive, and cost-effective. And there was a question that says nothing about competence, So what has happened to this act is that it's been suspended because they took it to court for review and stuff like that. And it was found that the way it was applied, Treasury would determine what's fair, what's equitable, what is transparent. But when it was read, the lawyers were saying that every department should be able to determine what's fair for them, what's equitable in that area, because it can't just be a generic thing from Treasury. So I don't know how far they are with reforming it and making sure that it aligns, but yeah, that is that piece of legislation. So the optimal way to do it, formulate a procurement policy to suit a particular organization. You can't have a procurement policy that works for everyone. So for instance, the Department of Health, their mandate is different to the Department of Education. So how they do things and what their aim, what their objectives are. And then you create regular procedures that everyone can follow. So you standardize the process and then make provision for emergency. In case of emergency, what happens? So for instance, with the Department of Education, you write this, you submit, you apply, you wait for tender, invite this many people if it's a certain amount of money, and over this period, blah, blah, there's all those rules. What happens in an emergency? There was that, was it Rirefir or something? There was a school where a bridge collapsed and money had to be spent. You know, this was a bridge that collapsed during school hours. Fortunately, no one was hurt, but this was a live environment. So the following day, kids want to come to school, or you can't take them out of school for far too long while you wait for these processes. There's also political implications, right? The political space is very highly contested. And this is why, so when you are a councillor in an area and then there's potholes, your opposition will go with the news there to show that you're not doing anything. Look at the potholes. This area doesn't have water. So there's also that. Okay, so when you create these procedures, and I'm talking about public sector here, you look at what does it mean. Again, in the private sector, you still get involved in politics, not necessarily party politics. But if you make a decision that creates a particular perception about you, what would be the implications of that? An example that comes to mind, I don't know where you guys were or what you were busy with at the time. There was a song called Jerusalem that became very, very popular. And schools and businesses, I think there was a dance that went with it. So a lot of organizations recorded themselves doing the Jerusalem step, dancing to the song, right? And then private hospitals. And when they did, and it showed on TV and on social media, people
Ma'am,
it was like
struggling to
about
hear
50% of your employees.
Ma'am, I'm struggling to hear you. I think your network is glitching.
Okay, let me just check. Sorry, just trying to see. It looks fine on my side, but I just want to make sure.
We can hear you now.
Can you hear me
Yeah.
now? But
Yeah.
I'm just trying to see if I wanted it's on 3 bars, which should be fine, but I want to make it at least 4, 4 or 5. So if you could just give me a moment. Please tell me how it is now.
It sounds fine, ma'am.
Yeah, we can
Okay,
hear you.
I don't know where you lost me.
Think you're speaking about Jerusalem hospitals.
Okay. All right. No, I was just saying that there were hospitals that when they did the dance with their staff and they recorded, it wasn't quite representative of the population stats of South Africa. And that created a particular perception. And they had to actually be intentional about making sure that they adhere to that. You have your big companies like your Discovery Health, and they don't want those questions raised because at the end of the day, government still is the biggest client for the private sector. So even with construction, the biggest client is government. They own the most buildings, they own the most infrastructure. So if you have them as your client, you are sort of guaranteed money and a lot of it. So again, you would have those. So whatever procedures you create, what are the implications of such procedures? The use of BEE compliant suppliers. What are your options? Are you going to lease services? Are you going to outsource? And then you review your policies periodically, and then you adapt to suit whatever circumstances. Okay. Tendering, I've covered the types of tendering, I think. So you can read through this. I'm just going to see, we've spoken about what it is that it is to select, or you create competition to select a suitable contractor, and so that you can obtain an acceptable offer where you can establish a contract. There's the methods. This is just this table. Oh, it moved. It speaks to the process, where you prepare the information notice, notify, contract notice, and call for tenders. So it is that process. You can read through that. I don't have to explain this. Then, well, that it's a technical process. You have to include, so it's your technical notes that you include in your tender document. So what it is that technically, what are you asking the contractors to do? Scheduling, how long do they have to do it? So you can tell them, I want you to build me a school. You have 12 months to build it. How they stagger their activities is up to them, but you're giving them 12 months. Okay. Then what's the strategy? Again, do you expect them to bring in local labor? What is it? Okay, what's the legalities around it and the sort of contract management that you will be doing? So with different types of contracts, there's different levels of administration involved. If you use the NEC contract, the NEC is admin intensive. It is very, very admin intensive in comparison to the JBCC. So there's a lot more in terms of administration to do when you're running a project on NEC than what you do when you're running it on NEC. And obviously, if the contractor is going to have someone who's constantly managing and administering and doing all these things, there's a cost to that. Okay. Then you look at the documents required for the tender document. So what information do the tenderers need to determine a price for the project? Okay, they need to know where this is going to be built. They need drawings of what it is, okay, unless you're saying they should draw it. And then they need specifications. What is it made up of? Are we building a prefab structure? Is it a brick and mortar? Are you using some sort of other method, new method maybe? And then how much of it is there? So you would use the bill of quantities, a schedule of pricing, a pricing document of some sort. And then what contract management type? How are you going to administer the contract? What are the articles of agreement? So remember, you would want the contractor to submit certain information, and maybe they even submit guarantees and all of that. All of these things, they have to think about how much it's going to cost them. What are the conditions of contract? Any project-specific data, what are the project schedules? And then you have open tendering, selective tendering, and negotiation. I've already covered those. You can read there. And you will just see which method is suited for whatever. Obviously, with negotiation, negotiation would work when you're doing something that is different, okay? Or sometimes you're designing it as you go. So you sort of have the contractor there to negotiate with them. They assist in the advising and all of that. And then you negotiate a price with them when the time to build comes. So it's a sort of, you will negotiate and they say, no, I can do it for this much. And then you negotiate them down. Obviously, your only place of negotiation is their markup, because the cost of materials, the cost of labor, that is pretty much standard. But in terms of how much they want to make out of it, so you sort of appoint a contractor early on, and then in terms, you negotiate the pricing. And there's also, under negotiation, you can have serial contracting, where contractors are asked to bid for one project. And so on the basis that if they do it correctly or to the satisfaction of the client, then they will be given the other buildings that would follow the same. So With negotiation, you solicit from a single tenderer. Competitive, you sort of engage a few, and then one with the lowest tender or lowest offer will get it. But this is if they're pre-qualified. Sometimes you have competitive negotiation where you solicit it from a few tenderers and then you negotiate with those, and then you decide based on that. Okay. So then we speak of the tender evaluation process. We look at the financial offer and if there are any qualifications. So some contractors will say, I'll do it for a certain amount, provided 1, 2, 3, you know. So let's say we want them to extend the school and they say, I can do it for this amount in 3 months, provided you take everyone out of the school and I have access to the entire place. And we're like, ooh, that sounds good, but we don't have anywhere to decant the students into, so sorry, we can't take you, you know. So the financial offer. So it could be based on just how much they say they will do it for, or there's how much they say they will do it for, plus other preferences. So if you think about government and their BEE requirements, you find that you may have the best financial offer, but you do not have the correct BEE credentials. Therefore, you don't meet that preference. Therefore, they can't give you the tender. Sometimes it's the quality, sometimes it's financial offer, quality, and preferences. So when you select, you also take into account financial stability of the tenderer you are selecting. You don't want a tenderer who will stop work at the first sign of financial challenges. So let's say you pay and then there's a glitch with the banking system and then he doesn't get the money on Friday as promised. It only reflects on Monday. And that Monday, because he left on Friday without having been paid Monday, he doesn't pitch for work. They're sitting and waiting. Also, you don't want somebody who will go under, you know, and lose their liquidity halfway through the project because it's going to cost you more. You now have to stop them and procure somebody else, and that is costly. So you look at their past record as well in terms of work that they've done, how they've done, their reputation, their experience, recommendations. You know, the same way they will look for references when you apply for a job, the same way they will call you people who've worked with you before to find out what sort of a person you are. Do you work well in a team? Do you know, so contractors will use different strategies, like they will pitch the bid or just front and back loading of bills. And this is when contractors will load a lot of money on items that are going to be done at the beginning of the construction, or they load the money to things that will be done towards the end. So when you are adjudicating, you sort of look at that. So with front end loading, what happens is they will put a lot of money on items that will be done early. So let's say they gave you the lowest price. They said, we'll do this job for 5 million, whereas everybody was pitching in at 7.5 million. But what they do is, this is a 5-month contract. They will do it at 5 million. However, what they've done is in the first 4 months, they would have made with the work that they will do, not in the first 4 months, the first 2, sorry. In the first 2 months, that work that they will do in the first 2 months, they've made sure that by that work, they make about 3.5 million. And then you are still left with 3 more months. But what's also left is 1.5 million. So they can walk away from the project and you would be left with less money than the value of work that still needs to be done. Usually when they front end load, you know, they're up to no good. Okay. And then sometimes contractors price in a way that predicts variations. So what they do is they look at your designs. So in your designs, sometimes you haven't provided detail. You've set a typical this, meaning at construction, I will give you more detail. So they realize that there could be a variation there. So there, where the specification is not too clear, they price it at a certain level. So whether sometimes you know you're going to need something and you measure a small quantity of it because you're not sure just how much of it you're going to need. So then those things with small quantities, they will put a very heavy rate So you could say 10 square meters of flooring. And he says, okay, I will charge you 750 Rand per square meter of flooring. Because it's a small quantity, you see 7,500, it doesn't click that actually I've measured 10 square meters. What the contractor is looking at is like, okay, if this flooring, from what I see, this flooring is going to end up at 300 square meters of flooring. Now, 300 square meters at 750 a square meter, that's going to be some serious money when he could have really charged like maybe 220 a square meter. Maybe it's very simple flooring. So again, they look at your where there isn't enough information, where they can see that there will be a variation here. And because they're already within the contract, when that variation hits, you can't negotiate anymore. You already have a rate that you signed on, and this is when you're using NEC, not JBCC. And now they can just charge you more. I don't know if you watch the news, but you'll hear MECs complaining about variations because sometimes this is what happens. They think, because then in government, they sometimes force you to go with the lowest tender and you say, you know, this person, the way they've priced may be a problem. It looks low, but it's actually not. And they're like, no, this is the one we go with, and they go with them. A variation hits, and then they realize this cheap solution is actually very expensive. You know, so it's you have, when you're evaluating, you have to look at how contractors have priced. It's one of those. Tarazalo, you are asking what is pitching the bid. So generally, that's when they price based on the bid document and they pitch it at the level of the bid. So they're not doing any funny business. Okay, that's what it is. Then you look at what client strategies they will bring. So it's market competition. So you rely on market competition as your strategy to say, okay, remember the big five construction companies during the World Cup, they decided to collude and say, look, there's 5 stadiums to build, there's 5 of us. Let's all just make sure that one of us gets a stadium each, type of thing. You know, so if you rely on market competition, there could be collusion. Or there's incentive contracting approaches, you know, where maybe you incentivize them in a particular way, or you want them to do something. Like, remember what I said about, okay, what would be your lasting legacy to this community? What are you going to leave? What are you, you know, so that this project doesn't just produce the project, but it leaves a lasting impression. Then you have some framework agreements. So generally, when you have a framework agreement, you have a framework agreement with a bunch of suppliers. You agree rates at framework level, so that when you ask them to come and do work, you negotiate based on that base framework agreement. Okay, so here, this is just additional information that's not going to be in a test. But what they're saying is the cost of tendering is quoted between 1 to 15%. I don't know if it's 1 to 15% of a project, but that is the cost of the amount of time you spend on those things. So contractors will tell you that for responding to tenders is very time consuming. And if you keep on responding and you don't get it, it cripples you because you have to pay people for that work. You look at the pre-tendering marketing, the tendering itself, the post-tendering, so monitoring, adjudication, and then enforcement. So when people do not perform and now you have to litigate. You have electronic tendering, which we don't use much. That would be used online with e-notification, EE. I think we still prefer hard copies submitted. We haven't really gone off online. There's reverse auction and other techniques. I don't know how reverse auction would work in tendering. Please don't ask me. Then you have your post-tendering monitoring and adjudication. This was said around 2022 that e-tendering is increasingly the trend internationally, but limited use in South Africa. And I think this is still relevant. Even today, we are not much of e-tenders. We still prefer hard copies. Then you have the Integrity Management and Business Ethics, the Competition Act number 89 of 1998, non-competitive behavior, collusion, all of those. So it is against the law to engage in an anti-competitive behaviors, and this is why there was the construction mafia, okay, after the World Cup. Bid rigging, again, it's when competitors collude, so contractors just sit and decide, we know there's only so many of us, we don't have to be selfish, let's share. That means you're not getting much benefit out of the competition because they fixed the prices. Then you have that SBD9 certificate of independent bid determination that tenderers have to sign to say they're independent, they're not influenced by anything, they haven't, so this, like I say, this was like recent competition. This can't be recent anymore. I'll have to update this, but that was the competition commission findings on the 2010 World Cup stadium thing. This was around 2018, 2019. So around 2020, 2021, it was still very recent findings. It's not recent anymore. We're in 2026. We do not have much infrastructure happening. So I doubt the Competition Commission will find anything with regards to the industry. There was also, I don't know if you remember, but this was also not too far ago, where the Competition Commission said our fee scales, professional fee scales, are non-competitive because everyone is just competing based on the same scale, and that everybody should price independently. And then they did for a while, the fee scales were suspended, but they've made their way back. Okay, this is just stuff you can read that I've already spoken about. Any questions? I'm going to cover delict, so we're going to finish at 8:30. I apologize. I'm going to cover delict so that we can, because then JBCC is in your test. All right, no questions. I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to give you until 5:15, so 5 minutes break, and then we come back for delict, and then we're done. Sorry. So you can go make yourself a cup of coffee.